Why hello friends, Jen Foxbot here for another edition of Math Mondays, na. Yeah! Alright, in this episode we're going to talk about algebra. Woo! Algebra! Yeah! One of those math subjects that you can never get away from. But don't worry, because once we understand how to wield the powers of algebra, we actually can do a lot of really powerful things with mathematics. So first, why is algebra important? Well, algebra, just like when we're learning how to read more complex types of literature that involve footnotes and citations and parentheses and all of those extra things, algebra lets us read and write in more complex math sentences. I was requested to do a few videos on algebra. There's a lot of topics in algebra, so I want to do kind of a mini series where I cover the big picture concepts in Algebra 1 and 2. That being said, if you do have a topic or a concept in algebra or problem in algebra, like a math problem, please let me know and we can tackle it together. In this first episode, I want to talk about order of operations and variables, and we'll use a specific equation as an example to talk about what variables are and how we manipulate them with mathematics. All right, so in algebra, one of the first things that we learn is order of operations. And so even though I'm a bigger fan of understanding why things work in mathematics, as opposed to memorizing a bunch of stuff, unfortunately, there are certain things that we do have to memorize. Just like when we're learning to read, we have to memorize grammar and stuff like that. And so order of operations is one of those kind of fundamental rules of mathematics that it's good to just get in your head because it makes things go a lot quicker. So let's do a really quick example. So I'm going to write an equation, 4 plus 2 squared minus 2 times 3 minus 5. Okay, so using order of operations, the first operation that we do in any equation are things that are in parentheses. And so that would be these two parts. 4 plus 2 is 8, so I can rewrite that as 8 squared minus, oh my gosh, we have two operations in the parentheses. What do we do? Well, then we need to go down the list of order of operations. So the list goes like this. Parentheses, powers, like this 2 right here, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. And so you can see in this parentheses, we have 2 times 3 minus 5. So even if I were to write this backwards and write it as -5 plus 2 times 3, because we're comfortable with reading mathematics from left to right, but if it was written this way, I would still do the multiplication first. And that is really important because it allows us to make sure that we get the same answer as everybody else. And that's really what these fundamental rules of mathematics are all about. It's communication, and it's making sure that we follow the same steps so that we get the same results. Because otherwise it makes it hard to talk about our math, right? Okay, so 2 times 3 is 6. So we would do 6 minus 5. And now I would simplify this parenthesis before I do anything else, which would give me 8 squared minus 1. And then we go down the list of order of operations, which we find we have a power, and so we need to square 8 before we subtract 1, which gives us 64 minus 1 equals 63. So if we were to use a different order of operations than the one that is commonly accepted, we would get a different answer. And so if you wanted to write your own math language, you could pick whatever order of operations you wanted. There are reasons for why we have this order, but at the end of the day, the biggest reason is that so we can communicate effectively. And so that when we're doing mathematics, that we can all agree on the right answer. Okay, so that's order of operations, which is super important for any type of algebra. What about variables? what the heck is a variable? If I write an equation like y equals 1/2 x plus 7, why do I have this funny mix of letters and numbers? I thought we were doing math, not English. Well, variables are super important, and they're also really special in mathematics. Variables allow us to represent quantities that we don't know. They also let us represent quantities that change over time. So age is a perfect example because our age changes over time. It's inevitable, right? We get older as time passes on, so it goes, and hopefully wiser, maybe. When we're talking about age, it can be helpful to use a variable because the variable allows us to represent an idea or a concept or a quantity like age without having to pinpoint it and say, this is the one age of all, the one age to rule them all sort of thing. So variables are super helpful when we have more complicated ideas that we are trying to represent. So I found this equation as an example for us to talk about because I was thinking about age as something that is, a thing that we all experience, right? Our age changes. And that's true for every living thing on Earth. We all age, and so our age is not stagnant. 7 is a number. 7 is 7 all the time, forever and ever and ever. That number doesn't change. But this letter, and this letter too, x on the right side of the equation and y on the left side, both of those variables can change. The important thing for us to know when dealing with variables is what the variables represent. In this case, x is going to be my age, or the age of someone using the equation. And y is going to be the age of the minimum acceptable person, the minimum age, hold on, this is hard to phrase, the minimum age that it's acceptable for you to date. Okay, I think I got it. And so this was kind of a silly little social equation that my friends and I would toss around in our early 20s because we would be, 18 to 20 and older men would try and flirt with my friends and I, and it was really odd because we were like, yo, you're way past this half age plus 7 rule. It's not a hard and fast stop. Love has no bounds, and that's fine. But it is generally a little bit weird for someone who's 55 to be flirting with someone who's 20. And quantifying that comes down to the half age plus 7 rule, which basically says you should only date people that are older than half your age plus 7. So I also like this concept because it's easy to remember, right? And so when we're doing mathematics or trying to learn new concepts, sometimes it can help to work with things that are a little silly or taboo because it allows it to stick in our brain a little bit better. Okay, so how do we use variables in this instance? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that x is the independent variable, which means that x is the one that's loosey-goosey and can change. And as x changes, it affects y. So y depends on x. In other words, y is the dependent variable. So the way that we can understand equations like this is by figuring out what happens to y when we have different values of x. And so what we can do is we can plug in, we can determine a value for x. We can just pick one or use our own age. So we can pick a value of x and then calculate a value of y. So let's say x is 20. Then we can calculate y by plugging in 20 for x. And so I would write 1/2 times 20 plus 7. 1/2 times 20 is 10, plus 7 is 17. So y would be 17. And likewise, I could do this for 30, and I just replace. This is where variables come in super handy. And so 1/2 times 30 is 15. 15 plus 7, hold on, 5 plus 2 is 22. Okay. And so let's say you are 40. 1/2 times 40 is 20, plus 7 is 27. Let's do one more. Let's do 50. So if you were, actually, let's do 100. Life goals to make it to 100. Okay, so if you were 100, the half age plus 7 social rule would say that the youngest person that you should be dating is 57. That's pretty legit. I feel like at that point you're like, hey, young 57 person. All right, so as you can see, as x changes, our independent variable, it changes y. And we use x to calculate y. The last couple of things that I want to say about variables is that we have to understand what they mean so that we know not to combine things that are different. What does that mean? Well, basically, y and x are different quantities. We cannot combine them. 7 and x are different quantities. We cannot combine them. And the reason is because if we do, we will lose some crucial information that our equation is telling us. And so if we were to add other quantities, I don't know, like 3c plus 8a, we also have to determine what these variables mean for us to figure out if we can combine them or not. Because if we were told that c and a are constants, meaning they always have the same number, then we could plug in those numbers and simplify. A lot of algebra deals with simplification. And so as we go through this mini algebra series, we'll deal with more complex equations and we'll work on simplifying them. And so that's why we started with order of operations, because if we're going to simplify equations, then we have to simplify them in the correct order. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Please let me know if you have any questions about variables, order of operations, algebra, math, or like I said, please, before next Monday, let me know if there's a particular algebra topic you would really like me to cover. All right, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!